Here's one of the most limiting thoughts you can have during a day. Why did this happen to me? So when we have this thought, and when we ask the question this way, why did this happen to me? We get in the habit of looking at life and our workdays from a very passive perspective. So in this episode, I want to give you some situations where you might be asking this limiting question, and I want to offer you a new question that will help you flip this thought and approach each day as an active participant instead. Here we go. Hey, welcome to the Workday Mindset Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Amoroso. Every workday we encounter dozens of situations that we have to navigate in order to have a successful and productive workday. And the way you choose to think through those situations helps shape not only the kind of day you have, but the trajectory of your career. This podcast is all about helping you to navigate those situations, show up at your best, and be happier at work. I want to introduce you to what I think is one of the most limiting thoughts that each of us is consciously and subconsciously having each and every day. And here's the thought. Why did this happen to me? So I think if we pay close attention to how we are thinking throughout the day, we notice that this thought or some variation of this thought pops into our mind all day long in response to what we perceive in the moment to be a negative situation, or in response to something that interferes with the very well laid out plans that we had for that day. I personally catch myself having this kind of thought quite often, but to give you some more context for what I mean, let me give you a couple of examples of specific situations that commonly pop up where I think this plays out for many of us. So example one is when someone says no to us or something doesn't go our way. So a potential client says no, or an existing client or a colleague says that they don't like our work or they disagree with us, or maybe we don't get an opportunity that we wanted badly. When someone says no to us, or that they didn't like our work, or that they disagree with us, it's easy for us to take that personally and internalize what just happened, particularly if it's something that we worked hard on or cared about, or if we anticipated that it would be received with some sort of praise or acceptance. Example two is when we make a mistake. So when we make a mistake, we tend to immediately start to beat up on ourselves and say, how could I have done that? That was such a stupid thing to do. Or how could that have happened to me? And in doing that, we question why we didn't do something differently in the moment. And then example three is when something interrupts our plans for the day. When we start the day and think about what we have to do that day, we immediately set baseline expectations in our mind for how things are going to go. And then when something unexpected happens that we hadn't planned for, we get frustrated and upset that this thing impacted our day. And all of these thoughts originate from a place of choosing to look at each of these situations through the lens of, why did this happen to me? But here's one of the major problems with that viewpoint. When we ask the question that way, why did this happen to me? We get in the habit of looking at life and our workdays from a very passive perspective. It's the perspective of someone who is constantly having things happen to them, right? It makes it feel like the outside world has it in for us. It's conspiring against us. There's something outside of us that's making these things happen. And this kind of thinking robs us of our power, and it robs us of our confidence and our ability to move through our day from an active perspective as opposed to a passive one. And our minds react in this way because we want to know the reason why things happen to us so that we can protect ourselves. So in other words, if we come across a situation where it feels like we've encountered something outside of us that has the potential to cause us harm, like negative feedback or making a mistake, for example, our brain kicks into survival mode and starts asking the question, why, so that it can protect us in that moment, and also make a note of the root cause so that it can protect us again if it were to come up in the future. So the origin of the thought, why did this happen to me, really comes from a place of feeling like we need to protect ourselves. And when we feel like we need to protect ourselves, we automatically look at every situation we encounter with a level of suspicion so that we can do a better job of protecting ourselves the next time it comes up. So, how do we address this? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to practice flipping that thought. So instead of asking, why did this happen to me? I want you to ask the question, how did this happen for me? And when we ask the question this way, it allows us to move from a place of passiveness to being an active participant in what happens next. So we're essentially flipping from being someone who has things that are happening to them all day to someone who is taking every single thing that happens and using it as a way to move forward. In other words, we can take the things that we used to think that happened to us, and we can realize that we always have a choice to view everything that happens as an opportunity to outgrow the old state of mind that caused us to think that way in the first place. And we can enter into a new state of mind that allows us to grow past that pattern of negative thinking. So here's the ultimate value of learning how to do this. When you choose to think about things from the perspective of how did this happen for me, then you no longer have to subject yourself to the repetitive disappointment, the anxiousness, the anger, or the frustration that arises when a particular situation presents itself. So I want to pause here for a second, and I want you to picture with as much specificity as possible a recurring situation in your day where when this particular situation happens, it always puts you in the same scared, anxious, or frustrated state of mind. So just bring to mind a recurring situation where no matter how good of a day you're having or how good of a mood you're in, if this situation pops up, it always triggers you to feel like something is happening to you. So keep this image or this situation top of mind for a minute. And as you're thinking about it, I want you to consider how great it would be to stop feeling that way every time this thing happens to you. And to be clear, it's happening to you because you're viewing it as happening to you. And what I want you to do is flip that and empower yourself by asking, how could this situation be happening for me instead? So let me give you an example here. Let's say that a potential client says no, or someone says they didn't like the work that you did. Instead of taking it personally and viewing it as something that person did to you, what you can do is step into the role of an active participant and try to figure out how to use what happened for you and to your benefit. So if you make a mistake, instead of immediately beating up on yourself, you step into the role of an active participant and ask, what did I just learn? And when something interrupts your plans for the day, instead of getting caught up in how what's happened didn't align with your expectations, you start to move away from feeling like something happened to you, and you step into the role of being an active participant by taking that new information and using it to reshape and reset your expectations. And when you practice stepping into this new role, it allows you to quickly shed your old expectations of what you wanted to happen because they no longer apply. And once you're able to shed your old expectations, then you can create a brand new plan because of the new information you've received. And I really want you to try this for yourself, because what I think you'll notice is that if you practice this enough, you start to become the kind of person who, no matter what situation you encounter, you always know that it's going to be okay because you've decided and you believe that you always get to play a role in what happens next. So if you practice this enough, you realize that you are no longer powerless over any situation that you encounter. So it's a life-changing realization to have, and I really want each of you to be able to experience it. So here's what I would like you to do for yourself this week, and there's 3 simple steps. First, I want you to try to catch yourself one time each day where you're thinking about something from the perspective of, why did this happen to me? Second, when you catch yourself having that thought, I want you to flip it to, how did this happen for me? And make a choice to be an active participant in what happens next. And then third, when I do this exercise, I find it helpful to write down right then and there one way that I can become an active participant in what happens next. So in other words, what step am I going to take to move from being passive to more active with this particular situation. So, to wrap this up, if you become someone who always looks at things as happening for you, then there's always a takeaway. Instead of bathing yourself in self-misery and loathing all day, feeling like things are happening to you, you get to have opportunities all day long that help you move forward. Now, the answer to the question, how is this happening for me, might not present itself right away, or it might not be an answer that you particularly like. But the answers to this question are the answers that help us the most, and it's called growth. And growth can be hard, but that's what it's all about. So if you want to shift your focus from being passive to active during your workday, then start by changing the way that you ask that question. Things don't happen to you, they happen for you. Go have a great workday. Hey, thanks for listening to this episode of the Workday Mindset Podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, I'd appreciate it if you could head over to whatever service you're using to tune in and give us a 5-star review. The Workday Mindset Podcast is a collaboration with Populous Radio. Check out their other shows at populousradio.com. Thanks for tuning in, and go get them.